All right, have your textbooks open to page 72. You did the homework section numbers 1 through 17. We've been working a lot with percents lately. Of course, what does percent mean, class? 100. And we learned how to change fractions into percents, decimals into percents, percents into decimals, percents into fractions. What if I need to make a percent into a fraction? How do I turn a percent? Let's just say it's 12%. And I want to make that a fraction. What would I need to do, Jalen?
Put 12 over 100.
Yeah, after all, percent means 100, so just put whatever you have over 100 and then reduce it down, in this case, to... Kirsten?
6 over 50.
6 over 50. We're halfway home. We got a little bit more we could still do. 3/25 would be our reduced form. We also said if I wanted to make a percent into a decimal, what would I need to do? To make a percent into a decimal, Kirsten? Boink, boink. I love the way she answered it. So what would I get?
0.12.
0.12, because the decimal is currently here at the end of the number. We boink, boink. We've got 0.12. But conversely, we said if I had a decimal, something like 0.037, and if I wanted to turn that into a percent, what would I have to do, Michael?
Move the decimal to the right twice.
Move the decimal to the right twice. And what wouldst I have it, Michael?
You have 3.7%.
There we go. 3.7%. We boink, boink that way. Now, the question is, how do we remember whether we boink, boink this way or boink, boink that way? What's a good way to remember, Sam?
Multiply, you go like right, and then divide, you go out.
Well, that's if you're multiplying and dividing by powers of 10, Corey.
D2P.
D2P. If you have a percent and you're going to a decimal, boink, boink that way, like we saw here. Boink, boink. If you have a decimal and you're going to a percent, you boink, boink the other way. And there's our answer. What if I wanted to make a fraction? Something like, I don't know, 5/8. And I wanted to make it into a percent. There's two ways we could do this. What would we probably do with something like 5/8? Luciana?
Make it into decimal.
What is 5/8 as a decimal?
0.65.
What if we didn't remember that? Or what if it was one we hadn't memorized? How would we make it a decimal?
You would divide 5 by 8.
Yeah, just divide 5 by 8. Of course, you get all that stuff. Fortunately, it is memorized, so we didn't have to do that. And then once you've got it as a decimal, we do what we just did a minute ago, class. Boink, boink. And what do we get for our answer?
Upside down back to
62.5%. But there was another way we could approach it, though maybe not with something like 5/8, but maybe if we had something like 7/20. There's something we might do with this fraction. Rather than taking the time to divide and get a decimal, not that we couldn't, there was another trick we could use. Do you remember, Bryson? Sam?
You know 5 times 20 is 100, so you just do times 5.
So getting an equivalent fraction, you said, multiply 5 to get 35/100ths, and therefore that is 35%. So if the denominator can become 100 pretty easily, you could go that route as well. Let's see how we did on the homework then. Number 1, 9/10 becomes what, Elaine?
90%.
90%. 7/8 becomes what, Ben?
87.5%.
Good, 87.5%. 13/20 page.
65%.
65%. 3/10, Bryson.
30%.
30%. And then on number 5, it started a section where we had to change fractional percents to decimals. And we looked at this yesterday. If we have a fraction in a percent, I said first we have to change just the fraction, class, to a,
0.25.
well, in this case, yes, but in general, change the fraction to a
Decimal.
decimal. And 1/4 is,
25.
don't touch anything else. Keep the 5, keep the percent, just make the fraction a decimal. And then, class,
Move the decimal over twice.
move it over twice, or 1 And so what do we get for our answer then on number 5? Jalen?
0.0525.
0.0525. How about number 6, Luciana?
0.0775.
I'm sorry?
0.0775.
0.0775 is correct. How about number 7, Bryson? 0.672, number 8 page.
0.597.
Good, 0.597. You don't necessarily have to put the 0 before the point, but it's not wrong to either. What about number 9, 5/8%? Corey, be careful.
0.00525.
Ooh, really close. 5/8 is 0.625, but you were right in this, that you change it to the 0.625, not 0.525%, and then move it 2 more places. 0.00625 should have been our answer. How many had that? How many just had 0.625? Remember, the decimal first, then move it the 2 extra places. So for number 10, what should we have had for redemption, Corey?
0.002.
0.002. How many had that for 10? How many just had 0.2? Okay, careful. Remember, it's 0.2%. Then the boink kicks in. Number 11, Kirsten.
0.0034.
Ooh, where's the decimal in 34%?
At the end.
It's at the end. And all we do is boink twice, right? Boink gets us what?
0.34.
They threw an easy one in on you, and it tricked you. You were so used to the extra boinks that you fell for it. So for number 12, for redemption, Kirsten, what should we have had?
0.91.
0.91. There we go. Anyone else fall into the trap on 11 and 12? They gave you all the hard ones, and when they threw easy ones at you, it fooled you? Good. Nobody else got fooled. That's awesome. Let's see. Number 13, writing 7.5% as a decimal, Sam. 0.075. What about 456% as a decimal, Elaine?
4.56.
4.56. What about 0.014 as a percent, Michael? 14A.
1.40%.
1.4%. You can say 1.40%. That's fine. We just don't need the extra 0. What about 3.44 as a percent, Ben?
344%.
344%. No and, but yes. Number 15 says, write 12% as a fraction in lowest terms. Oops, I didn't realize that was in the homework. It's 3/25. Hopefully you had that. Number 16A, when you multiply by 10 cubed, Jalen?
57,200.
57,200. What about on letter B when we divide by 10 to the 5th, Luciana?
1.42571.
Good, 1.42571. And number 17, a local florist sold 147 single flowers last Friday. Of the total flowers sold, 49 were roses. What was the ratio of roses sold to total flowers sold? Bryson? Give me the initial answer.
9 or 49 over 141.
Good. 49 to 147 should, of course, be the initial answer. And you could write it a number of different ways. I like the fraction approach best, but of course you could use the colon, you could use the word to. Does this thing reduce, Bryson?
Yes.
It does. Now, what did you reduce it to?
Or 130.
1 to 3. How many realized it would reduce to 1 to 3? How many looked at us like, there's no way that thing reduces? I'll be honest with you, it doesn't look like anything we'd recognize. Here's your tip. What's the only number in 49? 7. So if it's going to reduce, it would have to be divisible by 7, right? 2, 1. So yes, if you divide by 7, you're going to get 7 over 21. Oh, now that reduces to 1/3. So, or 1 to 3 rather, since it's a ratio. So yeah, so try what, if you're not sure about something, like if I had, I don't know, that's almost too easy. Anyway, think about what's in the smaller of the two numbers, and try whatever's in the smaller number and see if you can reduce by that. One more thing I did want to look at real quick, maybe just in the side margin of your book. I want you to turn these percents into decimals. Turn these percents into decimals. There's 3 more for you in the side margin of your book. let's take a look at these. Paige, on the first one, remember the first step is only to change the fraction. Leave everything else alone. What do I initially get?
0.75.
Oh, 3/5? Remember, for a fifth, you always just double the numerator. So it'd be 104 point class 6. So you just double the 3 to get a 6. How many had 104.6% initially? Not as your final answer, but initially. Then in a separate second step, back to page, what do we need to do?
With the decimal twice.
To get what?
1.046.
1.046. How many had that answer for the first one? Look at the next one. Elaine, what do we need to initially change this to?
15.9.
Percent, right? And then in the next step, we'll get
0.159.
0.159. How many had that answer? All right, Luciana, on the next one, what do we initially need to change this to?
0.25%.
There we go, 0.25%. And then
0.0025.
I'm sorry?
0.0025.
There we go, 0.0025. I thought I heard you say percent. You're like, no. The whole point of blank is for the percent sign to fall off. There we go, 0.0025. How many got all 3 of these correct? Questions on this? Any questions on basic percents before we move on? Well, let's take a quiz over it then. Go ahead and clear it us, except for a plain sheet of paper and a pencil. Plain sheet of paper. Nothing to do whining and fussing. Plain sheet of paper and a pencil. Everything else off your desks. Plain sheet of paper, pencil. Let's make sure we've got a good handle on this. Yeah, this is quiz 5. Quiz 5. Make sure things are tucked underneath your desk, not beside your desk. That way as I walk around, I don't trip and fall and go boom. I'm not a fan of tripping, falling, and going boom. Y'all are fans if I trip and fall and go boom, but I'm not so much a fan of it, so. Come on, Michael, you need a clean sheet of paper. There we go. Alright. Come on, Luciana. You can do it. Alright, first last name in the name spot. And today's date in the date spot. Today's 9/26/23. 9/26/23, today's date. And let's take a look at the quiz together before you get started. Numbers 1 through 3. You've got a couple decimals, you've got a fraction, turn them into percents. For numbers 4 through 18, you've got a bunch of percents, turn them all into decimals. And for numbers 9 and 10, you've got a couple of percents, turn those into fractions, written, of course, in lowest terms. All right, should be pretty straightforward for you. Go ahead and get started. Sure to show your work, just in case you make some careless little mistake. Show your work so you can get partial credit. Keep your eyes on your own paper as you work. Use that cover sheet. Keep your answers covered. several people already finishing. You're still working, that's okay. Got a few more minutes to finish up. Just another minute to be finishing. Lectures from you at this time. If you were going to take your textbooks out, turn to page 72. Page 72. One final concept we need to go over before your test coming up on Friday in lesson 34 is this idea of percentage. So page 72, take a look at percentage and mark that first sentence. Percentage is the part of a whole for a given percent. A percentage is a part of the whole for a given percent. How many of you have gone with your family to a nice restaurant? I'm not talking about like Burger King. A nice restaurant where you sit down and somebody brings your meal and they refill your drinks and all of that. You'll know what I'm talking about. Okay, that person does not, out of the goodness of their heart, take care of you. That person does it for two reasons. Number one, the restaurant is paying them. And number two, they expect your mom and dad to pay a little to them as well. How many know what I'm talking about? Class, what am I talking about?
Tips.
Tips, absolutely. Ladies, any of you go to a beauty salon or whatever and have a total stranger work on your hair and make it look gorgeous? How many of you, Bryson, you have to go to a salon to get your hair made gorgeous? All right. Find a new, just kidding. Anyway, I cut my own. My wife figured out how to cut her own because she was tired of paying the prices to the beauty salon and then usually not do as good a job anyway, so she figured out how to do it herself. Any of you do your own hair? Maybe cut yourself? No, you trust somebody else? Okay, you kind of do. All right, but anyway, when you go there, obviously you pay a price, but they also expect a tip. And that tip is a certain percentage of whatever your meal costs, right? So if you, for instance, let's say your family goes out, and I know this is like, pre-Biden era, but let's suppose you can get a decent meal for $40 as a family. And if the waitress or waiter does a decent job serving you, you would usually leave about an 18% tip. If they do really well, you might go 20, I've gone as high as 25% for outstanding service. If they're awful, don't leave no tip. Even if they're awful, leave at least 15%, okay? Even if they're bad, you can complain to management later, okay? But even if they're bad, leave a tip. It's the Christian thing to do, right? Do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. Everybody has a bad day. What if you have a bad day one time, right? So, okay, you'll be charitable. But 18% is kind of that benchmark tip, or gratuity is what it's sometimes called. And you'd want to leave 18% of a fraction of the total bill. Let's see, how many of you have ever gone with your parents to a car dealership to look at a new car or used car? And of course, the salesman works very, very hard to convince your parents to buy a certain vehicle. One day when it's you, just a few short years away, and then the roads won't be safe anymore. But anyway, Jalen is highly offended. She's like, how did he know he was talking about me? Anyway, but in a few years, right, the salesman really, really wants to sell you this car. Like, they will bend over backwards to sell you a car, especially the later in the month it is. Not literally bend over backwards. It's a figure of speech, Michael. It means they'll do anything to try to sell you the car. Why? Because they get, Class A, part of the money from the sale. They get a percentage of the sale. We call it commission. How many have heard of commission? They're working hard for that commission. Realtors do the same thing when they sell houses. They get a piece of the pie, so to speak. They get a part of the sale of the house. I think it's 3% for each of the two realtors who work the deal. But that's a piece of the pie. They want to sell houses. Why? Because if they can sell the house, they make a little money. So especially toward the end of the month when bills are coming due and the salesman maybe hasn't had a lot of sales yet that month, he gets more desperate to sell something, anything, right? So they might beg their manager to lower the price of the car a little bit more. Because after all, while they'd like to sell the car for a lot more because that's a bigger piece of a bigger pie, right? If they don't sell the car, they get no pie. Okay? And they want to make that commission. That's a percentage. For instance, let's suppose you buy a used car for $24,000. And that salesman's commission rate is, let's just say, 3%. I don't know how realistic that is. Let's say they get 3% of that part of the sale of the car to keep for themselves. They can feed their family. They're starving children. Please buy a car. Okay, anyway. After all, it was only driven by a little old lady on Sundays only. It only has 10,000 miles on this little cupcake. How can you possibly turn it down? No issues whatsoever. Motor? What motor? Just kidding. Anyway, right, that's a part. Much more to the thing that my children have learned. They go to the Dollar Tree, which, by the way, it's not $1 anymore. How many have discovered that? Yeah, $1.25. And that's most of the items. Then they got a separate section for items that cost more. But anyway, even Five Below, right? It's like the glorified Dollar Tree. Have any been to Five Below? Yeah, most of the things are below $5 or $5, except this other section that's like above the knee, above the 5, or above the whatever they call it. Anyway, above the knee. Anyway, there's a place called Below the Knee. That's where that came from. Anyway, but $1.25, and my kids are like, okay, $1.25. We can do math. If I buy 4 items, $1.25, $1.25, $1.25, $1.25, that's $5. Oh no, it's not. It's not $5. You walk in there with a $5 bill, you are going to be disappointed. You're going to be putting something you wanted back. Why? Because of taxes. Taxes are percentages. There's a piece of the pie that Uncle Sam wants. Well, Uncle Sam in Sweet Home Alabama or Georgia or whatever, wherever you are when you're buying your stuff at Dollar Tree, the government wants a share of the sale, right? They want taxes. For instance, let's suppose your family does some grocery shopping. Let's make life easy. Let's suppose the groceries cost a nice even $100. They must only be buying for a few days now. We used to spend about $100 on groceries. That's when we had 2 kids. We now have 4, and Biden's in office, so now groceries cost $200. And so anyway, but in Alabama, where I live, sales tax is 9.5%. It's a portion of the total. It's a percentage. Now, we've seen this with fractions. Of. Percent works the same way. Of means, class, multiply. So when you find percentage, very straightforward, you simply multiply the percent times the whatever. In this case, it's money, right? Just multiply. But you've got to change the percent to a decimal. So 0.18 would get multiplied by 40, right? But remember we talked about hanging zeros earlier in the year? I'm not gonna multiply by 40. No. I'm gonna multiply by 4. I'm gonna hang the 0. 4 times 8?
32.
32. Carry the 3. 4 times 1 plus 3? 7. I'll put the 0 back. Now how many decimal places, class? 2. $7.20 is how much the waiter or waitress receives. So really, and then by the way, there's taxes as well that you have to pay even when you eat out. So taxes is another 8 or 9%. So that's whatever. So your dad ends up spending like $53 to eat out on a $40 tab. Anyway, let's talk about the car salesman, right? If he gets a 3% commission, well, first we have to change 3% to a decimal. What is that as a decimal, Corey?
0.03.
0.03. But am I really going to multiply by 24,000, class?
No.
No, I'm either going to hang the zeros, or there's another trick you could use. As many zeros as I have, that's how many decimal places I could knock out, right? Because after all, if I hung 2 zeros and then I boink 2 times, those 2 zeros would just fall off anyway, right? So I'm going to scribble off 2 zeros and scribble off the decimal. Now I'm just going to multiply 3 times 240. 3 times 0? 0. 3 times 4? 3 times 2 plus 1? 7 plus the 1. So the salesman gets $720 from that sale. So that way he can buy groceries to feed his family and pay his mortgage and his car payment and whatever. You get the idea, right? So he can live. Look at the next one. 9.5% of 100. First, what's a half as a decimal, class? 0.5. But then we've got to move the decimal 2 places. Point becomes what, class? 0.095. And of means, and we're going to multiply by 100. Am I really going to multiply by 100?
No.
I'm just going to take 2 of the zeros, knock them off, and I'm going to take off 2 of those decimal places, which takes me back to 9.5, and we're going to multiply by 1. Well, what's 1 times 9.5? 9.5. But this is supposed to be money, so we got to make a second decimal place. Anyway, we'll say $9.50 is the taxes on $100 worth of groceries. The government wants $9.50 extra for them. So that way they can maintain your roads and public schools and pay the mayor and county commission, all the other stuff. Anyway, yes, sir.
On a daily basis, how much money do you think the government makes from taxes?
Less than it spends, unfortunately. The question was, how much does the government make from taxes? The answer is less than it spends. It spends so much more than it makes. We are trillions of dollars in debt right now and growing daily. Anyway, let's move on. Look at page 73, if you would. Look at page 73. And you look at the example problem here. They say 40% of 20. Well, notice, class, they changed the 40% to 0.4, and they multiply by 20. Well, what I would do is I would say, well, I've got 1 decimal, I got 1 0, right? Knock off the 0, knock off the decimal. 4 times 2 is? We're done. Again, you can knock off as many decimal places as you have zeros. Look at the next one. 12% of, is that 80? Yeah, of $80. All right, we got $80. We're taking 12%. That means, class, we're multiplying by 0.12. Remember, change the percent to a decimal. But I've got 1 0. Let me knock off the 0, which means I get to knock off how many decimal places, class? 1. So I still have a decimal here. I'm going to look at it this way. What's 8 times 12? 96. We memorized that in elementary, didn't we? Put it in the 1 decimal place, but wow, once again, it's money. Tack on another 0. $9.60. Do you see what they did there? Again, do you have to knock off zeros and get rid of decimal places, Paige? No, you don't have to. Water bottle on the floor. But you could, right? You could do that. There's another way we could approach it, though. Look at the little box, the little blue shaded box on page 73. 25%. Class, what is that as a decimal? 0.25. What's that as a fraction? 1/4. 1/4 of 16. Don't you think that's easier than multiplying a decimal? Some percents could work really nice for you if you know what they are. Look at the bottom example there. 155% of 82. I want you to write this down in the side of the book. 100% means all of something. 100% means all of something. 100% means all of something. What if you have more than 100%? You have more than all of something. So if we get 155% of 82, class, do you understand we should look for an answer to be bigger than 82? Because that'd be 100%. We have more than 100%, so we should get more than 82. Notice what they did. There's no little tricks on this one. You just multiply 1.55, looking at the example in your book, times 82, and they got 127.1, or 127.10 if you didn't want to take the 0 off. Easy enough. Change the percent to a decimal and multiply to find that percentage. 130% of 20. I don't know that I would go that route. I feel like that's a stretch. I mean, it works, right? They changed 130 hundredths to 13 tenths. They canceled the 10 and 20 to get 2 and multiply to get 26. Honestly, 130% of 20. I'm looking at this as a 1.30 or a 1.3. I'm seeing 1 0. I knock off 1 decimal. 2 times 13 is 26. I think it's just as easy. Even if you didn't knock off the 0, 26.0, it's still really easy. So that would be my suggestion there. But you could change that percent to a fraction. Questions on that? Turn the page. I want you to do numbers 1 through 6 at the bottom of page 74. Page 74, numbers 1 through 6 at the bottom of the page. If you finish early, spend a few minutes looking over table A, but finish 1 through 6 first. Luciana, Mike, a few people finished. Take another minute to work. Again, if you finish early, be looking over table A, just above the work you did. All right, pencils down. Even if you're not finished with all 6 of these, let's see how we did. Though on number 1, what is 18% of 1,200 then?
216.
216. How about 25% of 650, Sam? 162.5 would be correct. 88% of 440. What did you have, Bryson?
I didn't get
Did not get to
Alright,
that one.
I did, but I
Didn't finish it. Okay, do you have some others finished below it?
finished. No.
No, okay, so we're working a little slow. We'll work on multiplication, speeding up a little bit. What did you get for number 3, Corey?
387.2.
So 387.2 is correct. Number 4, 42% of 300, Elaine.
18.
Ooh, Jalen?
1.26.
Ooh,
126.
126. Again, to me, the shortcut here is yes, this becomes 0.42, but I've got 2 decimal places and 2 zeros. Knock off the 2 zeros, knock off the 2 decimal places, just multiply 42 times 3. If you went ahead and multiplied the 0.42, again, it's a long way around it, but I mean, you could, right? And you get 126 still. Number 5, 91% of 75, back to Elaine for redemption.
68.25.
That is correct, 68.25. And then 2% of 520. What did you get? Let's go back to Jalen for redemption.
104.
Ooh, just a tiny bit off there. Luciana?
10.40.
I'm sorry?
10.40.
10.40 or just 10.4. So again, you got the 0.02 that you're multiplying by the 520. Are you trying to do the knockoff decimals trick? Okay, so you knock off a 0 and knock off 1 decimal to make it a 0.2. And so you get the 104, but there's just the 1 decimal place in there. And there's the 10.4. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So knock off 1 decimal place with 1 0, knock off 2 decimal places with 2 zeros, and so forth. All right, anyone perfect on all the ones you did on 1 through 6? Are there any questions on 1 through 6? Look at the chart with me. Notice 10% is a tenth. That's 10 hundredths. 20% is 2 tenths or a fifth. 30%, look down a little bit below that, 3 tenths. 40% would be 4 tenths or 2 fifths. 50% would be 5 tenths or 1/2. 60%. You get the idea? But each of these, you could also make them decimals, couldn't you? 10% is 0.1, that's a tenth. 20% is 0.2, we memorized that's a fifth. 25% class is 0.25, we memorized that's a fourth. 30% 0.3, place value, that's 3 tenths. 40% 0.4, we memorized that's 2 fifths. Do you see that a lot of these are memorized decimal equivalents? So these percent fraction equivalent things, like, they're not new. I do want to point out this, if you would. Look at 12.5%. Fourth column. A half is what decimal class? 0.5. 12.5%. Boing, boing. 0.125, 1/8. 37.5%. 0.375, 3/8. Do you see that column with the 8s in it? Notice they have the half percents in them. They can turn into fractions. So what if somebody was what if we had the problem 37.5% of 16? That just looks awful, doesn't it? Unless you realize this is 0.5, this is 0.375, this is 3/8. Of means
Multiply.
16 over 1. Wasn't that easy? So if you can spot some of those and turn them into fractions, it can save you a lot of time. But I really want you to put a star next to the final column. Circle that final column. When you see these, you must change to fractions. Why? Because they involve repeating decimals, and it is impossible for you to multiply by a repeating decimal. You cannot possibly write an infinite number of 6s or 3s or whatever repeats. You can't do it. And if you round, your answer will be wrong. So for these, if you see 16 2/3%, that means 0.16666666. You've got to change it all the way to what fraction class?
0.16.
1/6. I said, what fraction, class? 1/6. If you see 33 1/3%, class, you have to change it to 1/3. If you see 66 2/3%, you have to change it to 2/3. If you see 83 1/3%, you have to change it to 5/6. By the way, how many watch Shark Tank? Watch Shark Tank? How many have noticed when the sharks make an offer, they offer to buy a percentage of the company? And oftentimes, if there's two people up there on the carpet presenting their business, they'll offer, I'll give you this much money for a 33 1/3% stake in your company. Why does the shark offer that? Because what is 33 1/3%, class? 1/3. They want to have equal thirds with the other two owners of the company. So that's what they're offering there. So make sure you memorize these percent fraction equivalents. They're going to be important. Look at the next page. Do you notice on number, there's one I wanted to draw your attention to. Look at number 13, class. On this one, do you see the 16 2/3%? 2/3 is what decimal? 0.6 repeating. If there's a repeating decimal, you can't go with a decimal. You're going to have to change 16 2/3% or 16.6 repeating percent to what fraction, class? 1/6 is 0.16 repeating. You're going to have to go with a 1/6 on a problem like that. Or on number 15, there we see it again, 33 1/3%, class, is what fraction? 1/3. You can't go with a decimal there. You've got to go with the 1/3 and multiply. Does that make sense? When you see those repeating decimals. For homework this evening, we're going to look more at that tomorrow, but for homework this evening, need you to do page 75. Page 75. The homework, 1 to 14. Page 75. The homework, numbers 1 through 14. Don't forget, test coming up Friday. That's lesson 34 for those watching, and that'll cover sections 1.9 to 2.3. We're going to wrap this up tomorrow. All this talk of percentages. Thursday, we review. Friday, test. All right. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and see you tomorrow. You're dismissed when the bell rings.